morning and happy Wednesday today. Uh, Welcome to this week's edition of Offit Kurman's Remote Rundown, changing the day on you a little bit to Wednesday. I'm Jim Reese, Director of Business Development at Offit Kurman, and each week I'm joined with labor and employment attorneys Russell Berger, Sarah Sawyer, and Veronica Yu for a conversation about the latest and most relevant employment issues related to COVID-19 and advice for owners and employers on how to best deal with these issues. Plenty of development since our meeting last week. So Russell, why don't you start us off with today's discussion?
Sure, thanks, Jim. And our thought was this week that we would make this kind of our back to school special. A lot of the kids have already gone back or are going back next week. It's the beginning of September, so we figured this was a good time to really look at school-related issues as it pertains to COVID-19, particularly for employers. And right on cue, the Department of Labor at the end of last week issued some additional guidance regarding the application of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act to parents that have kids that are, for whatever reasons, not going back to school. And the short version of the guidance is that if a school is on full remote learning, then for purposes of the Families First Leave Act, the school is considered closed, which means that the parents would be entitled to up to 12 weeks of paid leave at the 2/3 of their regular wages cap, also subject to a per day cap as well. But in any event, that means that employers that have employees, like in the state of Maryland, where most schools are gone fully remote, their employees could seek out this leave and they'd be entitled to it. On the flip side, if you have employees whose kids go to private school where the school is open in full, but they decide not to send their kid to the private school, then that wouldn't qualify as the school being closed, and that wouldn't entitle that employee to leave under the act. I'm not really aware of too many situations where we have this in Maryland, but the guidance also talks about the hybrid situation, and I find this kind of just practically challenging. But what the guidance says is, if a child's on an alternating schedule at school, the days where the child is not allowed to go to school and must work remotely or stay home, those days the school would be closed under the definition of the law, and the employee would be entitled to Families First on those days, but not on the days where their child could go to school. So that presents, I think, a practical management challenge to employers. It also, if you imagine a scenario where there's multiple kids who might have different remote learning schedules, that complicates it even further. But I think the simple take-home point for most employers here in Maryland is that if an employee comes to you and says, I want to apply for Families First leave because my child is on full-time remote learning, you got to give them the application. You're going to have to approve that, assuming all the other conditions are met. So that's something to really keep an eye out on for employers.
Yeah, these additional guidance was such great timing because we were getting client questions about what happens when the employee has the option to either send their child to in-person schooling or do virtual learning. So this will give us a little more guidance from the DOL, which is great. But just also to remember, the expanded FMLA leave is a maximum of 12 weeks. So if your employee previously expended some of this leave earlier in the spring, it doesn't mean they get a brand new 12 weeks when they apply again. So definitely remember that there's this maximum amount. And also, if your employee isn't eligible for paid leave, you may also want to consider whether they'd be eligible for the traditional FMLA leave to care for a child with a serious medical condition. Don't forget, as we always say, your traditional employment laws. And yeah, I think we have to anticipate that virtual learning in your county may persist, or in-person schooling could be introduced this school year. It's kind of hard to know. So it's worth strategizing now how to respond to these inquiries and how you're going to be more flexible, whether that's remote work, flexibility of work schedules, or even considering some sort of on-site childcare, or coordinating with employees to set up some sort of childcare.
Yeah, as we're seeing here, with similarly to everything that we've seen during this pandemic, is that it's a somewhat fluid situation, and there's a certain level of lack of predictability involved here. And you know, as the school boards and stuff kind of pivot to address these things as well, you know, things are changing. You know, I know the Board of Education just approved a virtual learning plan, or mandate, I should say, about involving 3.5 hours of synchronous learning per day. So meaning like they're going to have to actually be like not just kind of self-learning or self-pacing, but actually interacting with their teacher and having actual like structure to that. So that's really going to impact as well employees, and what time, like when they can and can't remote work during the day. And these types of plans are going to continue to develop, because this is really uncharted territory for school systems. And so, you know, it's really, again, just employers are going to have to prepare to be flexible and understanding around this. It's also, you know, a lot of employees are having issue getting online, or, you know, they're getting their kids set up and then stuff's not working right. There's a lot of kinks in that. So, you know, there's definitely, we're gearing up for a lot of changes. Back in the spring when this first happened, it really was, you know, it was the beginning of the emergency. So pretty much anything went. You know, we weren't as worried as about the long-term consequences. I mean, we were all always worried about the long-term consequences of teaching children and making sure that they receive an education, but we were hoping it was only going to last a couple of weeks or a month or two. And the idea that Families First leave was going to last through December 31st was crazy. I can't believe it's going to last that long. And now here we are, we're going to be buttoned right up against that with the current, you know, school semester. So, you know, I think that the school boards and both the state and local governments are really looking at it, saying, how do we make sure that we're still meeting learning objectives, and that we're going to see a lot of changes in the next couple of weeks and months around that, to make sure that everything's working smoothly and that things are being accommodated. So people might, you know, employees may have to turn on a dime. All of a sudden, they might need more childcare. They might need less childcare. Their kids might go back. So it's really going to be flexibility is going to really be key here, if possible, if at all possible.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point, I think, in terms of how employers can try to manage through this. I mean, the advice we've been giving all along has been, you know, to the extent you can be flexible, particularly with remote work and work schedules, the better off you're going to be. Because, you know, if an employee is applying to take Families First leave, the challenge for that employee is, even if they qualify, they're not going to be getting paid as much as they would otherwise be if they were working. So there's probably some incentive for the employee to still try to find a way to work, even if it doesn't look exactly like what it used to. So to the extent you as an employer can provide those opportunities and create, you know, the ability for the employee to work full time, albeit in a, you know, a somewhat different way, you might actually get the employee working full time, which, you know, probably makes an employee happier, because, you know, they probably want to work and make that money and earn their full pay. And it probably makes your business flow a little bit smoother. You know, it's not as smooth as obviously having, you know, full-time work 9 to 5 in the office, or, you know, at the job site. But if you can find some way to accommodate it, you know, that's, to me, that's simpler and easier from an operational standpoint than having to deal with someone being out for 12 weeks and trying to fill that gap.
Yeah, and as always with these, you know, advances in the phases of reopening, make sure you're paying attention to your county specific phasing, because although Governor Hogan, you know, reopened all schools, or said schools could reopen last week, counties have been hesitant to move forward in that direction, and they're still trying to figure out what works best for their county. And that goes hand in hand with, you know, yesterday's announcement that Maryland's entering phase 3 of reopening. You know, counties are responding differently, and we're already seeing that even as of last night. So be on the lookout. I know Baltimore City is announcing next steps today, how they're going to respond to phase 3. And I think throughout this week, we'll be able to see how counties are responding to that news.
So I guess the key word is for the employer is flexibility. But this is a moving target, and practically speaking, what should the employer do? How can they manage the employees with this moving target situation where the school schedule will be changing on a regular basis? What should the employer do?
I would say make sure that they're communicating. I mean, the first step is communication, because it's really, you want to encourage your employees to be communicating with you step by step as things are changing. And you also want to be staying up to date on, the changes and stuff as well yourself, and kind of anticipating, that you may be receiving these requests and how you're going to handle the requests. And it's really going to be a different assessment depending on your business. So if you are a workforce that easily can have people work remote, well, just like throughout this whole crisis, you have a little bit of a, I don't know if an advantage is the right word, but it's a little bit easier to maybe transition someone to say, okay, well, you've got synchronous learning going on for your kid from noon to 4, that's fine. Instead of taking leave, though, can you shift your schedule, right? So work earlier, work later, work remote. Here's how we can be flexible. Here's how we can make sure we still get those hours in every day. And then if you end up needing to take some intermittent leave here and there for an hour or two a week or something, we can work with you on that. So that's kind of going to be a way to potentially handle it if remote work is an option. What's going to be very difficult, I think, is employers that don't have or jobs that do not have remote work options, because it really could be on a day-to-day basis. There could be changes to whether someone's able to come in or not, and whether they need to take leave. So if you fall in that category of business that really needs people there, and you may have a big workforce that's going to be impacted by this, and you need to be prepared for the fact that there may be some people that are going out for longer periods of time and may need to deal with some temporary work situations or hiring situations.
Yeah, I think, Sarah nailed it. Communication is really important, because everybody has different circumstances that as an employer, you may not be able to anticipate. So you need to be able to plan. But I would also recommend being proactive and reaching out to your attorneys for your specific instances and circumstances, so that we can help you plan. I know we've seen a couple of clients get out in front of these issues, anticipating them. And so now when things change, you kind of already have an idea of what you need to do in response. So it's never too early to start planning and setting contingency plans in place.
And that sounds like a good takeaway for you.
Sure. Yeah, there you go, Jim.
There you go. All right, Sarah, you got a takeaway for today?
Yeah, I mean, it feels, sometimes it feels like a broken record, but it just is so true that, just being flexible. I think we were talking on one of our episodes about a buzzword for the pandemic is pivot. So, it's just continuing to be flexible, staying up to date. I think Veronica nailed it as well, as far as just, planning, tapping your resources, things like that. And just being ready for these changes, and continuing to charge forward.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that, an element of creativity. We're in a situation we've never been in as a society, in terms of the way schools are working, the way business is operating, the restrictions that exist. And, at least here in Maryland, things seem to be getting better, but, we could talk about the second wave that might come this fall. I mean, there's all sorts of uncertainty, but I think that uncertainty gives everyone an opportunity to be creative and think about ways to accomplish what they need to accomplish in new, different, innovative manners.
Okay, great. Trivia time. We'll start with Sarah. What's been your biggest distraction while working from home?
I would say my dog is probably the easiest one there, but he was trying to participate in a conference call I had yesterday. So it was really, luckily people are very patient, but he's been pretty good. I would say it's him and the fire trucks are what's getting me over here. I don't make it through a day without a fire truck or the dog interrupting one call. I'm always grateful when they're internal, because it's a little less embarrassing. And I feel like my colleagues are pretty tolerant, but everyone's been pretty good about it. But that would probably be a little bit of a
Great
challenge.
answer. Great answer. Veronica.
So I'm gonna have to go with the dog on the distraction too, but I'll give you the flip of working from home has also distracted me from cooking for myself. So I've been a big offender of takeout. So that's the flip side.
That's an interesting one. Russell, we probably know your answer is pretty predictable, but we're going to let you answer anyhow.
Yeah. Children is a big distraction. I would add though that the dog is not so much a distraction for me, except for like the 4 times a day somebody delivers an Amazon or UPS package to our house because we don't go to stores anymore, so everything gets delivered. And he just has like a 2-minute barking fit at those junctures. But I can answer for Sarah and Veronica as well. For Sarah, it's definitely the fire trucks on our calls, and Veronica, it's definitely the dog squeak toys.
Thanks, Russell.
So those would be my and I wouldn't even call them interruptions or distractions, but those are my favorite bonus sounds I get when I'm on the phone with either of you.
Great answers. Well, thank you, everybody. Been a good conversation today. A back to school theme. That's been great, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
Thank you.